You know, maths was never exactly my strong suit, which I guess is the price you have to pay when you use a bottle of turpentine as a warm-up drink before going on a night out. But even my limited computational abilities were enough to tell me that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is likely to go down as one of the most expensive flops in Hollywood history. Not just because it stars an 80-year-old lead who was already over the hill when he did the last Indy movie 15 years ago. Not just because it's being made by a studio with a long and sordid track history of deconstructing, humiliating and destroying popular legacy male characters in a pathetic attempt to elevate their boring, generic and flawless idealized female replacements. Not just because the creative powerhouses responsible for the first 3 genuinely awesome installments of the franchise wanted nothing to do with this turd. Not just because it co-stars an insufferable female character played by an insufferable actress that's rapidly becoming the new Brie Larson.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Not just because of the scathing reviews coming from an access media that normally defends every new piece of soulless corporate entertainment like their very lives depended on it. And not just because every single teaser and trailer released for this movie has gone down about as well as Ezra Miller at a kid's birthday party.
The Mad Goose Wizard?
No, the reason it's destined to fail is the price tag. $300 million.
Fuck.
For that price, you could build 1,000 family homes in North America. You could buy 6,000 Teslas. You could build 37,000 water wells in Africa, 5,000 schools, or 12 fully equipped district hospitals. All of which would be a far more productive use of your $300 million than a bloated, overpriced, overproduced movie which nobody seems to want or care about. But drinker, you handsome globe-trotting dealer of rare antiquities, I hear you say. $300 million isn't that much to make back. Plenty of movies earn 2 or 3 times that amount at the box office, so what's the problem?
Son of a bitch!
Okay, so a lot of you are probably quite familiar with how the Hollywood box office system works, but as I've learned from places like Twitter, there's a shocking number of people who don't. So here's the Drinker's whistle-stop tour of how movies actually make their money. Now, imagine for a moment that you've made a film with a production budget of $20 million. Nice job, you absolute Chad, you. But hey, now it's time to release it into the wild and start raking in those sweet, sweet dollars. But wait, before you can do that, you have to promote the movie so that people actually know about it. That means running TV commercials, trailers, posters, billboards, press junkets, YouTube, radio and magazine ads, all of which cost money. A lot of money as it happens. At least half as much as the production budget, if not more. So that's another $10 million that you're gonna have to lay out. Now you've got to make back $30 million just to break even. That's okay though, because your movie's pretty good and $30 million isn't that much. But wait, there's more. Because as it turns out, movie theatres don't just show movies out of the kindness of their hearts. They're businesses who expect a cut of the profit, about 50% as a general rule. That means roughly half of the box office receipts are actually going to make their way back to you. So now your break-even point has jumped from 30 million to 60 million. And that's not even counting the interest that you probably have to pay back on all those loans you took out to actually get the movie financed. Or the fact that it's now common practice in the industry to underreport movie budgets by up to 20% using a combination of shady accounting practices and dodgy tax write-offs, or all those expensive back-end deals that you might have had to negotiate with your actors so that they get a cut of the box office on top of their salaries. Suddenly that all-important break-even point is looking further and further away, isn't it? Now imagine that your movie cost $300 million, well, that you're willing to admit publicly at least, with a marketing spend of about $150 million to go along with it. Plug those numbers into our little formula and you're looking at something in the region of $900 million at the global box office. And that's just to break even, never mind turning a profit. Because let's be honest, people don't gamble hundreds of millions of dollars just to make a few million back. They spend big because they expect to earn big, and this leads to one of the other major problems with big budget films today. Studio interference. See, Hollywood executives start to get kinda jittery when there's mountains of cash floating around, and it leads to a mindset of playing it safe, falling back on predictable tropes, previously successful strategies, relying on crowd-pleasing spectacle and bland, dumbed-down, inoffensive stories that even the dumbest consumer can follow. And how this manifests is that they start interfering with the production, demanding changes and reshoots to cater to their constantly changing ideas, altering and polluting the artistic vision while it's still being crafted. I mean, look at Justice League if you want an extreme example of how badly this shit can go wrong. Either way though, these unplanned changes inevitably slow down production, add into the time and costs involved, which in turn drives up the budget and increases the anxiety of the studio executives even more. It becomes a kind of self-perpetuating bullshit loop where their own overspending causes them to start meddling in things they don't really understand. And because they just can't leave it alone, each problem only serves to exacerbate the other. And ultimately the biggest loser is the movie itself, because what you usually end up with is a bloated, overproduced Frankenstein's monster of a film patched together from a bunch of conflicting ideas and demands, made by a demoralised cast and crew burned out by a protracted shoot, and edited together by overworked VFX teams that lack the time and resources to properly finish their work. Sound familiar? All of this adds up to one inescapable conclusion, not just about Indiana Jones, but about movies in general. They're too fucking expensive now. And because they're too expensive, they become too safe and predictable, too mired in studio inertia, too dependent on overblown visuals and tedious formulas. It's one of the many reasons the superhero genre is rapidly sliding into its Vegas residency phase. Well, apart from creative burnout, repetitive formulaic scripts, increasingly convoluted and ridiculous extended universes, a deluge of low-quality TV shows trying to ride the wave, and the simple fact that 2 decades of familiarity eventually breeds contempt and apathy. No, it's the fact that they're so fucking expensive to make. Most of them today rely on spectacle, big blowout set pieces, and a series of visual hammer blows to distract you from the fact that their story has all the energy, originality, and personality of an overworked, manically depressed AI, which is probably what actually writes most of them now. And you don't need me to tell you that visual effects are expensive, and the more you rely on them to get arses in seats, the more your budget creeps up and the more difficult it becomes to reach that magical break-even point. It's kind of ironic that the entire genre is basically sinking under its own weight, having to expend more and more resources to try to attract the attention of a dwindling audience, until eventually the formula collapses and the system becomes unsustainable. And believe me, that might not be far away at all. Having spoken to people in the industry, I can tell you that a lot of them just want the genre to fucking die so they can move on to something easier and more profitable. They all know that the end is coming, but it's difficult for a studio to let go of a good thing, especially when they still have like a dozen projects in the pipeline, and so they're stuck in a kind of creative purgatory, huddled around the dying embers of a once roaring fire and convinced they can somehow coax it back to life for a bit longer. All of this is to say that the age of the mega blockbuster feels like it might be coming to an end. Budgets and productions have grown to the point where they're almost exceeding the ability of the market to sustain them. And to be honest, I'm perfectly fine with that. Bigger is not always better. Some of the best movies I've watched this year were made for a fraction of Indy 5's budget. In fact, for what they spent on this, Disney could have produced half a dozen mid-budgeted movies and actually trusted the filmmakers to deliver bold and inventive artistic visions, instead of gambling everything on one film that had to reach an almost impossible goal just to avoid losing money. And in case you're wondering, for a bit of context here, the original Raiders of the Lost Ark was made for just $20 million. That's about $60 million in today's money. I wonder which one is going to be more fondly remembered. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.